What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing something that I haven't done very often on this channel. We're going to be ranking the BlumHouse Halloween Trilogy. I just recently rewatched all of the trilogy so that way I could have a fresh take on all of them for this video. I also made some notes on the good and bad for each of these movies just to make it a little bit easier. In my personal opinion, I don't think that these Halloween movies, specifically the timeline, is the best, but I thought that they had a very decent film quality and they had really good acting in them as well for the most part. And it also helps that I'm a huge Halloween fan, so regardless of how these movies are, except for maybe one of them, I still find that they're pretty enjoyable for the most part. Also, before we get into the actual ranking itself, we are going to be talking about spoilers, so this is your spoiler alert now. If you haven't seen these movies, go watch them and then come back and you'll be ready for this video. Alright, but with that all being said, let's just get right into the ranking. So I'm going to be going from worst to best. So starting off in my number 3rd spot, the worst movie in the trilogy, in my opinion, is Halloween Ends. Now, like I said, I have good and bad for these movies. Movies take a lot of time and effort to make, so I don't like to harp too much on anything without giving at least a little bit of positive notes here and there. So to start off with the good of Halloween Ends, the opening with Jeremy's death. I thought that was a pretty good way to open the movie since we haven't really seen something like that before. I also thought that the duo killing with Michael and Corey killing at the same time with the doctor and nurse that work with Allison, that was also a very well done scene. The score I really enjoyed in this movie, that was also very good, and the duo killing scene. That was a positive as well. And finally, the final confrontation between Michael and Laurie was, again, a good positive for me. I don't feel like it was really deserved given how the movie played out, but I think that the movie did a really good job ending Michael Myers indefinitely so that there's no way he could possibly come back in this trilogy. But it's Michael Myers, and with these movies, you just never know. I will admit, this movie was just not it for me, so there's notably a lot more negatives than positives. For the bad for Halloween Ends, I noted that the lack of Michael Myers really hindered this movie and it really just kind of dragged without him. So I think that if they would have had maybe just a few more scenes with Michael, it could have improved the movie's overall feel to it, but again, maybe not because this wasn't really Michael's story. Another gripe that I had with this was it felt like Lindsay lived for nothing. She appeared in maybe a few scenes here and there, but nothing really worth noting. So I feel like that was just kind of wasted here. The teens sucked in this movie. I was not a fan of the teen group that harassed Corey. They were just kind of asking to die. Really wasn't that sad whenever Michael killed them, so that could have been better. The characters also ranged from not treating Michael Myers seriously, such as the teenagers, to then blaming Laurie entirely for Michael Myers coming back. That didn't really make much sense since it wasn't her fault and she wasn't even related to him as in the other timelines. It just felt really weird to watch since both of those reactions seem pretty unnecessary and just don't really follow in line with what happened in the previous 2 movies of this trilogy. Following that, Allison also blames Laurie, it seems, for everything despite what happened in the previous movies, so I feel like she wasn't as likable, in my opinion, as she was in the first 2 movies, but that all took place in one night and day, so I guess getting more time with her character, you got a little bit of tiny development from her more than the other 2 movies, and to be honest, her character just wasn't my favorite. The movie also suffered from pretty bad pacing since it was just really slow and had very, very few scares, if any at all, that you could consider without being a jump scare. The time jump was also way too drastic. It was originally planned for Halloween Ends to take place on the same night as Kills in 2018. It probably would have benefited not doing this time jump. It just felt like it was disjointed from the other 2 movies, so I think that if they would have just eliminated that and kept it on the same night, the movie would have worked a lot better. And finally, Corey was okay as a character in general, but in my opinion, he just was not a very good villain. It just seemed like he had his focus on Allison, and then it kind of turned to him turning evil. This movie could have benefited from keeping Michael as the main villain, or if they really wanted to have this be Corey's story for some reason, they could have had Corey be introduced in 2018 or even Kills, so that way it wouldn't have felt so disjointed from the other movies that followed it. Alright, well that's pretty much all I have to say about Halloween Ends. It came out this past October in 2022, and it has pretty much the same ensemble from the last movie. You have Laurie, Allison, Hank, and Lindsay returning, but other than that, that's pretty much it, and you don't really get much from the other new characters, so you're not going to get much out of this movie if you like the other 2 or like the franchise as a whole. This movie just did not fit very well into the franchise at all, in my opinion. Alright, on to my number 2 spot. We're right in the middle here. This is going to be probably a little bit shocking for some of y'all, depending on how you guys feel now that it's been out for a few years, but my second place for this ranking goes to Halloween 2018. I know this is a lot of y'all's favorite sequel of all time after the original, but I gotta say, this movie could have done a lot more, and I think it really painted itself into a corner and the trilogy as a whole by erasing so much of the continuity and taking away Michael and Laurie's sibling relationship. I know that a lot of you guys didn't like it. I did. I just prefer him going after his family. It makes for a little bit of a better story, and it's just more entertaining because after a while, these Halloween movies aren't scary. They're just entertaining and jumpy to watch. So we're just gonna go ahead and go over the good section. For the good of Halloween 2018, the homages were done very well. However, though, if you have too many homages or Easter eggs, it can kind of become a little bit distracting or be seen as fan service, but I think that they were done pretty nicely here without going over the top. A few of them felt a little forced here and there, but as far as making homages to the original, I think it did that very well. Dana and Aaron's death was also a really good positive for this movie because it's the first time you see Michael actually in action for the first time in the movie, with the exception of the bus scene, which you only see like a small glimpse of him killing the son from the back seat, but you really get to see him shine for the first time throughout this attack and murder, which is also followed by another positive I have, the score. I thought that the music was phenomenal in this scene. I think that the score did a really good job amplifying some of the horror in this movie. Oscar's death is also another one that was a really good positive in this movie. I enjoyed the way that Michael was appearing in the darkness with the motion lights, and the score was also done very well in that scene, followed by Allison finding his body and running. Ow! Oh my God! Somebody help me, please! That entire sequence with the score, very, very well done. I really enjoyed that sequence probably the most in the movie itself. With the exception of Dana and Aaron, it's really close with those three. Another positive, the long shot was cool. I love how the sequence didn't seem to cut and Michael just had one goal in his mind, which was to kill people. And it was very creepy how he was just able to enter people's houses and catch them off guard. Personally, I think that the sequence could have gone on for maybe just a little bit longer, but I am happy with what we got because the sequence itself was done really well and had a really nice creepy vibe to it, playing off of the fact that even if you're in your house alone, you never know what could just be hiding right around the corner. The finale was good. I think that if the movie would have ended like this and there wouldn't have been a kills or ends, I really think it would have been a nice one-off movie ending on a note like this with Michael seemingly dying in the fire. There was no way he could have gotten out from what we saw in this movie, so it really did look like he was trapped in the fire for good, and they got away and escaped. So I think that while the finale was slightly predictable in some specific aspects, I think that overall it had a really good ending, and it would have been a really strong end to the franchise had they just done a one-off movie ending on this note. One more positive before we get into the bad of this movie, I would say that this is a very good Michael Myers performance. His movements and just his overall vibe and essence is very reminiscent of the original Halloween movies. So the Michael Myers performance here was done very well. And I really think that they chose wisely whenever they cast James Jude Courtney for Michael Myers. He really killed it in this role. Okay, now we're on to the bad section of this movie. So to get into the bad, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that this movie was pretty generic to me. It felt like it was a lot of filler, and I just really felt myself getting bored here and there throughout the movie whenever things weren't really necessarily happening. They could have probably added a few Michael Myers scenes in or maybe cut some stuff out, and it probably would have benefited the movie, but this movie just felt like it was dragging in certain spots, so they could have worked on that a little bit. The unnecessary comedy in some of the certain scenes, some of the jokes from the dad or the cop, they probably could have just taken them out because they felt very misplaced in the scenes that they were in to begin with. It just didn't really work for me. The opening to the movie's introduction was pretty meh for me. It takes place in that mental institution where they talk to Michael from behind and try to get his attention with the mask. I understand what they were going for here, making it a really important part to this trilogy's timeline. However, I think that the way that the movie opened here just felt jarring and out of place for me. Maybe because it was so bright and the way it was shot. I much prefer seeing Michael out on his own and not being in captivity. So just seeing him in an institution like that, all chained up and stuff, it really just kind of took a little bit of the scariness out of him for me. And one final thing before we move on to my number one spot, like I had already stated before, I'm just one of those people that thinks that Michael Myers Myers and Laurie should have stayed siblings. I feel like it made for much more entertaining movies, and while you knew what the motivation was and it wasn't as scary, I guess, it still could have worked a lot better in this movie and in this timeline and trilogy, because I feel like it just kind of made things a little bit more complicated despite erasing the continuity. Here you just really have Michael killing for no reason. While I get that they were going for ambiguity and not having any specific motivation, I feel like overall it was just kind of a lazy way to erase the continuity without really thinking through what was going to happen at the very end of the trilogy, because ultimately setting it up with Michael just coming and killing people without being related to Laurie, it just really didn't work for me at all, and would have much preferred that they just stayed siblings, or at the very least kept some of Michael's legacy within the other previous movies and having him actually have a few more kills under his belt, so he seems a little bit more dangerous than the way that the people in Haddonfield seem to portray him as. But like I said, this movie isn't perfect and it is kind of boring in spots, but it was still shot very well. It was at least somewhat entertaining, but overall this movie just wasn't my favorite Halloween movie. It's also not even in my favorite timeline, so it's just gonna go right here in the middle at spot number 2. All right, now that we're at my number 1 spot with the process of elimination, you've definitely guessed what my number 1 spot is, but my number 1 spot is Halloween Kills. Now, I know that quite a few of y'all did not enjoy Kills. However, I'm one of the people that thinks it was the best in the Halloween BlumHouse Trilogy timeline. It was just such a really fun time for me, and it felt like just a really fun, energetic, mindless slasher. So this one was right up my alley. To get into the good, I would say that once again, the score was very strong, like it is for all of these movies. You have John Carpenter back again, and it was really well and elevated the scenes with the intensity and scariness like before. The deaths in this movie are actually a positive for me, because the deaths in this movie were done very graphically and brutally and really lived up to the Kills name for this one.
Of evil.
So I really enjoyed that they raised the bar for these deaths and did not hold back at all. The intensity and the pacing of this movie was phenomenal, because once it already ends off of Halloween 2018 and it begins here, you're right in the middle of the chaos and you know what's going on, and it takes place immediately, just seconds after the 2018 movie. So as long as you've watched Halloween 2018, or if you watched it maybe before you saw this one, you're immediately ready to go, and it throws you just right into the center of it, and it is just a really fun thrill ride. For some reason, in my opinion, this felt more like a Halloween movie than all of them. In 2018, it just felt kind of slow, and it just felt like it was more focused on homages and setting Michael Myers back up as this main villain and this new Halloween timeline that they had. But with this one, it seems like now that everything's already been set up and everything started rolling, we finally get Michael Myers in full swing, and he is really brutal in this movie. He got creative with these kills, so that was really entertaining to watch. And lastly, I would say that while I did really enjoy James Jude Courtney's performance as Michael in Halloween 2018, I think he's really neck and neck here with his performance in this movie as well. He's a lot scarier, in my opinion, in this movie. He feels like he has a lot less patience, and he's just ready to go and kill anyone and anything that stands in his way. So this is definitely probably the scariest Michael Myers in the trilogy, in my opinion. And Halloween 2018's Michael Myers was more classic and subdued and was violent when he wanted to be, but this one was definitely all-out slasher Michael Myers, and it did not hold back one bit, and I loved every second of it. But with that all being said, though, for the bad section of this movie, I will say that I did not really like the mob mentality subplot with them gathering in the hospital and outside of it and just causing a huge ruckus and everything. It didn't really do anything for the movie other than just kind of hone in on the point that they were going for with the mob going against Michael Myers. I think this movie could have just done a lot less with the mob, and maybe could have gone about it in a way that didn't feel so heavy-handed or forced like they did in Halloween 4, which is where they had like maybe 1 or 2 groups of these mobs or people going after Michael Myers and hunting him down. If they would have gone about it that way instead of being so over the top with it. So yeah, the mob mentality subplot could have probably gone entirely, and I think this movie would have done a lot better. Speaking of the mob in the hospital, I really did not like Tivoli's death. That was probably the saddest I've ever been in a Halloween movie. Witnessing a death, it was really sad, and it just felt incredibly unnecessary and almost a little bit mean-spirited, but given the mob subplot, I understand why they had Tivoli die the way that he did, and how it impacted the people that were involved and were there. So I understand that, but like I said, it was really grisly and really just brutal and sad to watch. The next issue I have with this movie is that I feel like a lot of the characters were dumbed down. Specifically in this movie of the trilogy, some of these characters make really dumb decisions. They either freeze whenever they're about to get killed, or they don't go for a kill shot whenever Michael Myers is down on the ground. It's just things like that that they could have done where they could have made the characters a little bit smarter in this movie, so it didn't feel like you were actively frustrated with their decisions that ultimately led to them dying. Also, again, in this movie, Laurie is sidelined. She's in the hospital, similar to the way that she is in the original Halloween 2. So she doesn't really get too much to do in this movie other than at least attempt to try to escape and get to Michael Myers, but unfortunately that doesn't work out very well for her. So she's sidelined in this movie for a good, I'd say 90% of it. All right, guys, well, that pretty much covers my rankings of the movies. If I were to rate them out of 10 stars, I would have to give Halloween Kills 7.5 out of 10 stars because I just really had a lot of fun with that one and enjoyed it as a mindless slasher that connected the Halloween 2018 and Halloween End movies. I think that it was really good for what it was, and it just had a really fun time and didn't hold back on the gore at all. For Halloween 2018, I feel like that one's really middle of the road for me, so I would give it a 5 out of 10. It had a lot of nice things about it, such as the homages and Michael Myers' performance, and of course Jamie Lee Curtis, because of course you can't have a good Halloween movie without Jamie Lee Curtis.
Can't have a bona fide Halloween without Jamie Lee.
Nope. But anyways, like I said, this movie was not the worst, but I feel like it could have done a lot more to make itself a lot more entertaining and just a little bit scarier. And finally, Halloween Ends. I would give this one a 2 out of 10. I only enjoy the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis is back, even though she doesn't get as much to do as she usually does, but I think that she was probably the best part about this movie aside from the score. Allison did an okay job. I wasn't a huge fan of her character, but the acting was still done very well. But other than that, yeah, I didn't enjoy really anything about that movie, especially as a Halloween movie. So yeah, it's gonna currently stay at the very bottom of my trilogy ranking and have a 2 out of 10 star rating. But other than that, that pretty much covers this video's ranking and my feelings and thoughts on this Halloween timeline. I don't prefer this timeline. I'm one of those people that prefers to pretend that Resurrection didn't happen and just pretend that it's Halloween 1, 2, and H2O. I think those are the perfect 3 movies to watch as its own trilogy. And in my opinion, it feels like the H2O anniversary movie versus the H40 2018 anniversary movie handled itself a lot better, still connecting Michael and Laurie. So yeah, I'm one of the people that prefers the H2O Resurrection timeline, if you want to acknowledge it. But if you're still a huge fan of the Halloween movies, you're still going to enjoy these. They're not bad movies by any means. I just feel like they could have spent a little bit more time on them and have some better aspects to them that could have made them better Halloween movies standing in this timeline. However, I'm really excited to hear what you guys think. I know that my opinion on these movies and this timeline may be a little bit unpopular, but I'm really excited to hear what you guys think too. Let me know down in the comments below. I'm really excited to hear what you guys thought of these as well. Of course, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That really helps me out a lot. And hit the notifications bell so you know whenever I post new videos. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any other video ideas, let me know down in the comments below. I'm always looking for video suggestions and I really appreciate it. So if you have anything that you would want to suggest to me to do a video on, definitely let me know down below in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and I'll see you in the next one.